So this question has to do with guilt. Well, guilt, like every other human experience, as far as Buddhism is concerned, and I think any other system of thought that thinks about or is concerned about the welfare of an individual in their totality would also view it as a stepping stone, viewing guilt as a springboard, a stepping stone to better understanding of oneself, their situations and other beings, their relationships, but especially to gain a better purview, a better shot at seeing themselves and where they're coming from and what they have to deal with given a certain event or an action that they have committed or somebody else has committed. So it's just a stepping stone when you think of it. So although we don't necessarily have such a term or as guilt in Buddhism, but I can say that we do have what in English may be called remorse or anguish. To some extent guilt, regret, worry usually, etc., which in Pali we have words for, minus the guilt part, as I mentioned. So in Pali the terms are kukuccha, for example. Another one is anutapa and vipatisara. There's other ones too, but kukuccha usually is the one that comes to mind to describe that worrisome or remorseful state of mind, of heart, which when looked at deeply, we can see them as having, this is again from the eyes, from the understanding of the Dhamma or Buddhism. So when we look carefully at these various states of emotions and that I just mentioned, with guilt thrown in the mix as well, what we do see in them are the elements of hatred, anger, ill will, or that feeling of hot uneasiness. So it's a very uncomfortable, it's a dis-ease, a state of dis-ease, which in Buddhism we can call dosa, in the Pali language. But remorse arises due to there being some kind of an event or series of events where one has committed or is committing a wrongdoing, whether it's through their forgetfulness or by blatantly ignoring moral standards or values and or ethical standards that are essential to living a harmonious life, be it by yourself or with other beings. So this is constantly addressed in Buddhism. In fact, you can say that it is at the core of developing oneself in virtue, which is the first of the three trainings The three trainings basically constitute the development of the individual, the education of the person, the upbringing of a person. So the first is sila, or virtue, or moral development in virtuous behavior, where we are purifying oneself, the person is purifying oneself by abstaining from things that harm, either harming oneself or others. So essentially it is protection. Protecting yourself and protecting others. Sometimes it's a physical protection. Because you avoid certain situations, you physically will be protected from encountering painful situations where someone will come after you. Let's say you don't jump over the fence and go to your neighbor's backyard, or get into somebody else's boundary, or go into a store and take things. Well, if you do, you're going to get in trouble, right? So you maintain control over your behavior, but by doing so, you protect yourself and others. Now, this comes through the proper application of hiri and ottappa, which we have in Buddhism. These are, by the way, wise, moral sense of shame. Wise, basically. It's not the shame that people often talk about, to have to remove from oneself. Let's say, no, this is, you need to have this kind of sense of shame, decorum, some, propriety, and being considerate and morally wise while maintaining responsibility to remain pure and with virtuous character. So the person behaves always with universally benevolent principles, whether they're alone, meaning beyond the gaze of others, or in public, in the company of others, where we and our behavior are in basically plain sight for everyone to see. So these are hiri and ottappa. These are at the crux of developing yourself. It's interesting because the Buddha was often asked about the end of days of the Dhamma and of civilization. And he would often point at these two. When hiri and ottappa are no longer in people's hearts, where people are not carrying those two hugely important qualities to have in one's own character, hiri and ottappa, that wise sense of shame and wise sense of fear of wrongdoing, whether someone's watching you or not, whether you're alone, but you're thinking, what if those people that I love and care about found out that I'm doing this? Immediately you stop and you're halfway through the sentence and you don't complete it, you don't do it. If these two things are no longer in society, you can't see it, you can't observe it, that's the end of civilization, that's the end of days for the Dhamma, for the development of the person. So you can see how important it is, or these are, these twin qualities to have. So protecting your sanity, purity, tranquility, conscience, remaining level-headed, basically, guiltless, etc. All of which are essential for growth, for understanding, and for wisdom to take place. That's what sila does. That's what the development in and the protection of oneself through virtuous behavior does, really. It's not for you to walk around with a banner over your head saying, oh, I'm virtuous, or this a certain way you wear your clothes, with a title or a name tag says, these are, no. The images that we have of even the term morality, it has been, in the West especially, has been seen as something that is very oppressive. That's not what we see here. That's not what the Buddha taught and advocated and exemplified through his behavior, and similarly with his students. So, virtuous development is crucial. And that also plays a big part in identifying whether there is in fact a sense of guilt. Remember, guilt has, when you go to its roots, you see there being dosa. Dosa means anger, ill will, hatred. To whom? Towards whom? Usually oneself, at the very least. We're the easiest target we're going to find, right? And then through that avenue, we also project those arrows, those poisonous darts at others, situations, our past, etc. Not a good thing to have. Hiri and Ottappa are one thing. To maintain balance, tranquility, purity, level-headedness, guiltless state of being. Because it clears up the arena, the horizon for you to know what's going on. So we have countless examples in the suttas or discourses, by the way, where the Buddha always encourages individual students who, let's say, did commit a mistake, whether they know or realize at first that they did the thing in question, in order to address it, to bring attention to it, acknowledge it by apologizing for it, but truthfully apologizing for having committed it in the first place. So once the student understands the ramifications and you can say disharmonious situations and experiences that were created because of this event, because of this choice, because of their behavior or saying something, doing something, or even thinking something that is not correct, which ends up harming them, at least themselves, right? So once they do come to grips with, oh, I've done this, and they acknowledge that they've committed this, whether it's in the past or whether they're doing it now, by the way, or whether it's going to be affecting sometime in the future, affecting other people, that is. So it could be related with past, present, or future, whether it's towards yourself or towards others. So when the student acknowledges this, truthfully, knowingly, with maturity, we see so many examples where the Buddha, when he is the person who was wronged by such people, such students, who came and said, I'm sorry, Bhante, we apologize, that was a stupid, silly thing to do. And we see again and again, countless times in fact, where the Buddha acknowledges that they acknowledged it, but then he forgives them if they are truthfully approaching and saying, Bhante, I have committed this, and now I understand. That is where the forgiveness part comes in. That is, once there is honesty and genuine intention of abstaining from doing that thing again. Okay? This is key. This indicates growth. So that feeling of remorse, or guilt, as many understand it now, is not something to be held on to, basically. Because there's nothing glorious, really, in the maintenance of guilt, right? If we have indeed done things that were unwise, unskillful, and therefore caused us to get to this point where we're experiencing suffering. But if there is the understanding that, okay, what's happening when I'm holding on to this guilt? Well, there's this bitterness, there's this, as I was saying, this hot sense of dis-ease or uneasiness. It's very bitter, it's very ugly, it's very we feel like we lost our richness, our color, and we're doing it moment by moment. But that's where it serves its purpose, when you are able to see that at the root of it, at the root of remorse, there is ill will, there is hatred. Perhaps because there's a groove in the mind. Maybe there's an aspect in your subconscious mind where there's guilt itself becomes like the repeat button. So it doesn't matter the event, the details, the features of what happened exactly. It doesn't matter. The feeling itself, the emotional state that is very familiar of a taste for the mind to drop into, and it just gets locked in. It's like, hand in glove type of a situation, where suddenly the person feels comfortable in the familiar, the guilty feeling being the familiar aspect of things. But when we're understanding its purpose of why is there remorse, then that allows us to pierce through and dislodge, basically, to pull us out, remove us out of a mistaken understanding, which in the Dhamma is called micchaditti or ditti, wrong views that we held onto, or we're still holding on to, things and ideas, our perceptions of ourselves, etc., the other person, the situations. So, but when we are able to look deeply, we're no longer perpetuating or adding on more suffering. So there isn't that guilty feeling to sustain itself any further. Because if it is, then what we're talking about is perpetuation of conceit, right? Where we're separating ourselves from others, which in Buddhism is called mana, conceit. Conceit either in its inferior aspect or superior aspect, which in Western psychology it's called inferiority complex and superiority complex, right? But the perpetuation of conceit is also the result of there being ignorance. Totally unhealthy situation, because it does not get us to understanding. Again, the problem is that people even use guilt, however. Use it as to separate themselves from others, but primarily as a fuel for their conceit. As a fuel. Dry grass. hay, etc., to burn, gasoline, to burn, to increase the flames, the blaze of conceit, because there's nothing good that's going to come out of that guilty, sustainably guilty state. So in Buddhism we have 3 types of conceit, by the way. I mentioned it before in some talks, but one of them is the self-abasement, self-minimizing, I am inferior to you state. Some call it servility in English. In Pali we have terms like atinipata or omana, which basically is, you are better than me, you are, I am lesser than you type of a thing. Then we have just the conceit, which is mana, where we look upon ourselves as, better than others, so you can call it superiority complex. And the third one is the constant comparing yourself to others, as, we are equal to each other type of a thing. But they're all conceit. But anyhow, coming back to the guilty feeling, there's nothing glorious about it. There's nothing glorious about extending that guilty feeling in us. There's nothing noble, nothing religious, nothing spiritual about it. That is, once the action is committed, that we see it for what it is and is experienced, we are aware of it, we want to come clean, as the vernacular in English goes. We just need to admit the mistake committed and take the necessary steps seriously to truly abstain from doing that thing again. That's it, job's done. Remorse's job is done. And we move on, okay? So there's no guilt to talk about whatsoever. You see the difference in Buddhism? That's why I said we don't have necessarily guilt as such in the Buddhist language, in the Pali language, in the teachings. We do have remorse, but it's, if you notice, it's simply temporary. It comes up to the surface, boom, allows, it's like lightning. It shows you what's what, but then you take actions, immediate actions to address the situation. And then, because as I said, it's a stepping stone. You use it as it's a threshold. It allows you, it's a jumping board, springboard that takes you to a newer level of understanding, growth. That is essentially the key to becoming a better living being, better human being. Through understanding, through wisdom, becoming pure, and no one can purify you other than you. Guilt will not do that. It will do the opposite. I think it was Carl Jung, who once said that there is a major difference between, the terms he used were, major difference, he said, between clean pain and, I think it was, dirty guilt. A huge difference between clean pain, he said, and dirty guilt. I love that statement. This is Carl Jung from what I recall. So what I understand from that is that carrying guilt around is and makes us, especially keeps us, dirty. So our windows will remain smudged because our eyes won't be able to see anything nor recognize anything. Opportunities. A person might come, stand 2 feet away, look at us in the eye and say, I love you, we won't recognize it. Because our hearts will remain shut and unable to open and allow us to truly live, to see. So in essence, guilt shuts your eyes from what's really happening. So guilt, therefore, keeps you lazy. Right? Because if you're not seeing it, but you're still alive, you should be able to at least hear, see, use your other six senses and what's going on? What's going on? But it takes laziness for us to hold ourselves attached to the old pattern of, let's say in this case, we're addressing guilt, right? Which keeps us lazy from taking new steps, risks, and therefore guilt is doing nothing other than basically depriving you from expanding, from tasting, from trusting the future and its possibilities. Possibilities that could be yours to grow into. So, when guilt is maintained, it will rob you from the adventure that comes from self-discovery. We can also say that, unfortunately, in many cases, guilt has become a tool for, as I was saying about, as a fuel, but it also is basically a tool for gaining attention when used as a weapon to enslave either ourselves or others, to hold people captive, generations of people captive, entire populations captive. So by finding fault in them for things done by others, let's say their parents or great-grandparents or something, and holding it over their heads, as they say, right? Holding stuff, the guilty feeling over others' heads to use as a magic trigger or even a magic wand, sadly. To always, maintain that upper hand, to suddenly be in the right, or point out some horrific things about the other, perhaps to discredit or to undermine the truth that is taking place at present. So we have to be wise enough to see what's happening. Now, this could be done by ourselves, to ourselves, that is, or it could be done by us to others, or others are doing it to us. That's another thing. So we have to be smart enough to be looking carefully at what is taking place. Remember, when there is that genuine sense of remorse, which is followed immediately, when we talk about like remorse, genuine remorse, it is the other side of that is that we are also vowing, we are taking steps to abstain from doing that, behaving in that way that ended up causing us remorse in the first place, right? So that's something I'm taking as a one piece of the puzzle. The other is the other individual, the other party. It could be us too. We have wronged ourselves, let's say, and now we're feeling guilty to ourselves for having done that ourselves, right? There needs to be the other puzzle piece, which is the apology being accepted or forgiven, that forgiveness. That takes care of it very quickly. There's no need for perpetuating guilt. Otherwise, it's very unhealthy. Because many of us are doing this to ourselves, and for years. And we've been keeping ourselves slaves and basically captives to our past. in many cases to our childhood, upbringing perhaps. All unhealthy, depriving us of life and the many opportunities for growth and development to take place in us. And the wealth that was going to come out, it's shut down. Well, the wealth isn't going to stay there. If we're really growing as individuals, the fruits of that wonderful world will also be shared with the world around us. It's inevitable. It's a wonderful thing. If we allow it to be, of course. So the forgiveness has to be there. So once forgiveness is there, there's no point in maintaining guilt, right? That would be clearly stupid. So it has to be addressed like a lightning, in a sense. Remorse comes in and you see it, you take steps, you really meaningfully take steps to fix that situation. Maybe every day. And that's what Sila is. It's a training, right? The virtuous character building quality of that, building a morally aware, healthy, pure conduct towards all things, body, speech, mind, actions, purifies you. So the Buddha would always highlight, as I was mentioning, while forgiving someone who came, let's say, to apologize for a mistake they committed, once that person, as I said, is aware and is taking it with responsibility and basically ownership, they have that sense of ownership of what they did, what they thought, what they said, let's say. While forgiving the person, the Buddha would always make a point there to mention. You see this in those suttas, so many suttas, where he says it is indeed growth for both the person and the community, which we say the sasana, the dispensation, the teaching of the Buddha, the tradition, the Dhamma itself, what we call Buddhism that survived over 26 centuries. It's for the growth and perpetuation of all that wonderful things mentioned, especially the Dhamma, when someone realizes their mistake and admits it, asks forgiveness by seriously taking the necessary steps to not repeat that mistake. But to not have such an approach then sadly means that the tendency to hold on to things is still very much active and strong in the person. That sense of guilt, that sense of identification with a substantial self, an I-ness, that this is me-ness, that is you-ness. I did this to you or others, or you did this to me, right? All this is wrong view. Sakkaya Ditthi, we say, that idea of, it's not just an idea, it's an identification, the sense of identification with this sense of substantiality. So it's further and further like concretizing yourself, a thing, a personhood, when there's none. So guilt is, when it's perpetuating the sense of conceit in us, it's essentially also trying to fortify, to strengthen the sense or the concept and attachment to that concept of a selfhood, a substantial entity within us, the personhood, the independent thing, soul, if you will. You see the connection between guilt and all that? So when there is guilt arising, that's also a telltale sign that, hey, there's the deep sense of I-ness. Me, myself, this is mine, this is happening to me, or this is happened to me. All this. Or even that statement, oh, I am unworthy, this and that. It's like, wow, what an egotistical, what a conceited statement to be making. You have entire religions built on this nonsense, this wrong view, this Sakkaya Ditthi, perpetuation of a selfhood, of a substantial being inside of us. You see the connection between guilt and that? So growth can only happen when there is understanding, the bottom line, right? And holding on to guilt or remorse even means there is neither the understanding nor growth. Therefore, there's no wisdom. And in their stead, one is kept trapped, enslaved, and basically in constant fearful agony. That's guilt. Because after all, in such cases, guilt basically is serving to maintain a state of false sainthood. Which basically is a grand deception to both yourself and others. And others. Whether they know you're feeling guilty or they suspect it. So while continuously engaging in self-weakening practices and habits, lying to ourselves due to being unwilling to trust that we can, in fact, be truly happy, that we can be responsible, strong, and be able to take charge of our life, to make decisions without trying to defer the leading of our lives to others, or even our past tendencies, means you're done with guilt. It has taught you a lesson. But you have to stop engaging in that series of those series of self-weakening practices and habits, which guilt happens to be one. That's what I was trying to say with the unwillingness to trust ourselves, to keep lying to ourselves. So I hope this can shed some light on, well, guilt. Is it something legitimate? Is it something that we need to carry from moment to moment or from day to day? So I hope you see that the answer to that should be no. Should be no, N-O. And instead, yes, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's why we call Sila a training. We can't perform all the time the way we wanted. Something happened, our knees buckled, we couldn't. Something happened, other conditions, we didn't have enough sleep, this, that. We were doing this, I was supposed to finish this project, but I wasn't. Or I was supposed to hold myself stronger here, or I wasn't able to watch my thoughts when they went berserk, or. Where am I? I've often used that question, which came to me once years ago while I was doing a therapy session with a client. And they kept on throwing all these different things as causes, as to why they're like that. These thoughts, these ideas, these things, these narratives, inner narratives. And I said, could you, when that happens to you next time, could you just put it in the palm of your hand? Just let's anthropomorphize it, okay? Let's turn it into something tangible, something relatable. And you bring it to right next to your face. Ask yourself, how is this helping me now? If it's truly something constructive, you will have a series of, well, because it helps us this way, this, that. Sila, or principles of virtue, living with virtue, will give you many, many reasons as to why you're not supposed to be doing, let's say, drugs, why you're not supposed to be yelling at people, total strangers, why you're not supposed to be, cheating on your spouse or lying. The reasons, explanations will be many. However, when it comes to guilt, especially these downward spiral type of negative states that we continuously engage in, because of we haven't looked into what is really happening. But when you ask that question to guilt, or those guilty sensations or thoughts, if they're truly guilt-based, you will hear nothing but crickets, silence, because absolutely there's nothing good that will come out of them. So when you ask guilt, how is this helping me now? You won't hear anything back. Because guilt as such is not helpful, to say the least. It's not constructive. It's not taking you to adventure. It's not taking you to trust. It's not taking you to a deeper understanding of and realization of who you are, what's happening, and what are the connecting dots, and where's growth? Guilt doesn't take you there. The understanding, the responsibility taking, which is quickly followed by taking action, asking forgiveness. And what if the other person is not there? Let's say it's another person, involves other persons, people who, let's say, in ideal circumstances would be giving us the, yes, I forgive you, that, apology accepted. What if there isn't that? The genuineness of your approach in identifying, in seeing, in recognizing the patterns in you that prompted guilt to begin in the first place, to be on that cycle, that series of events that you were experiencing, truthfully, aware, putting it in the forefront of your life to find a resolution, if you are genuine, existence will provide you the I accept your apology, quote unquote. Your heart will smile back at you because it sees that you have let go of that sense of guilt. We don't have the Buddha, but the quality of the Buddha, the qualities of the Buddha, the honesty, the truthfulness, the beauty, the Dhamma. If we pay close attention to the heart, the luminosity of wisdom can pierce through. Can pierce through. There's not going to be any need for guilt, because there will be wisdom in its place. firmly establishing itself, its roots, down into you, in your life, in your heart, where your life will change. Sukhi hot.